moving to different places made me who I am today.
When I'm with people who accept me for who I am, then I feel like I belong. So
it is the people and the friendships, and it's like comforting. It's like this comforting space.
Sawadee ka, kia ora, and welcome to Our Way Home, a TCK podcast centered around finding home within the people we don't want to live without, and how our post-secondary school journeys went about. I'm Patty, and like you, I'm a student of life with a story to tell. I'm also one of a growing number of TCKs or third culture kids, individuals who as children accompanied our parents into another society and were raised in a third culture made up of the shared commonalities of those living an internationally mobile lifestyle. That description is based on details from the book Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds, which discusses various definitions and interpretations of the term TCK. My podcast, however, mainly focuses on exploring the stories of those who they themselves identify as and or relate to being a TCK. This is episode 1, where I myself, as well as two of my childhood friends, Ayumi and Sari, will be sharing our experiences. So let's begin with reintroductions.
Hi, I'm Ayumi. I was born in Japan, and then I moved to Vietnam when I was 3 years old, and I spent 2 years there. And then I moved to Malaysia, so that is where I met Patty and Sari. And I lived there for 4 years, and then I came back to Japan when I was 10 years old. So I transferred in the 5th grade of the Japanese education system. And ever since then, I've been living in Japan. So yeah, that's a brief history.
I think I've never realized you lived in Vietnam.
Really?
Did you know, Sari?
No. I'm sure you didn't suggested it, but it completely left out.
And would you like to share, Sari?
Yes. So hello, I'm Sari. I was born in France, and when I was about 2 months old, I moved to Spain for like about 6 years. And then I moved to Malaysia, where I met Patty and Ayumi. And then at the end of primary school, I moved to France, back again, lived there for 7 years. And now I am in London in the UK. So yeah.
Okay, so in my case, I was born in Thailand, and that's where my brother was born as well. Then my family moved to Malaysia for 4.5 years, and then moved to Egypt for another 2.5 years, and then at age 12, 12. I think 12. Then at age 12, we repatriated back to Thailand. But then in 2017, I moved to New Zealand, and my brother as well, where we're studying. So that's my brief history. So we can maybe start off by, since we moved around a lot, was there a move that was perhaps particularly challenging, or one did you find particularly easy?
Well, for me, I think the easier transition was from Vietnam to Malaysia because, well, first I already kind of spoke English, so it wasn't that much of a barrier going into an international school in Malaysia. But the more difficult transition was when I had to come back to Japan from an international school in Malaysia because although Japanese is my first language, I wasn't really fluent in writing in Japanese and I wasn't quite sure about the Japanese school culture. So I think I struggled a lot coming back to Japan. And yeah, to be honest, I kind of still struggle with Japanese culture. So yeah, coming back to Japan was kind of a big event in my life.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to go or do you want to go first? Sari?
Yes, I can go. So I think I didn't have the same kind of transition in the way of having kind of moved to a place where the language and the type of school was different because I've always been in international schools, and I think that enables like some continuity. But I think it's more in each move. So moving from Spain to Malaysia, which was my first move, and from Malaysia to France, there's always that kind of scary feeling of you're going to a new place, you have no friends. And I remember in each case, in the first day, it's that kind of nervousness. But immediately, I think this is what I love about international schools. But there's just like this welcome. I mean, I remember Patty, like the first day, and you, and like just like people there that have been in the situation that are so comfortable and open with being making new friends and things. So that I think is always like two sides. Yeah.
Yeah, in my case, moving from Thailand to Malaysia, I guess I was so young, and also it was first time moving, so it's quite exciting. Every subsequent move, I think, was harder. And like you, Ayumi, for me, it was repatriating that was by far the most difficult. I could speak Thai, but I didn't get the jokes. It was hard to fit in. And I still studied at an international school, but it was an online international school. And as someone who was so involved in the school community prior, when I switched to virtual learning, that for me was compounded with adjusting to, being in Thailand and feeling like a hidden immigrant. That started like my struggles with mental health and whatnot. But so like with you, Ayumi, definitely repatriation is the most difficult.
Yeah, totally.
And I mean, like, I think a thing that we can discuss is, sometimes when people see, like, those of us with globally mobile lifestyles, they forget that, every time we move, it's not our choice. And it isn't even our parents' choice sometimes. It's almost like either you move or you lose your job because that was the way, how the company functioned. So just thinking in this case, like, do you think you would have been happy, say, if you stayed at certain places where you were?
I think initial thoughts, I think now that I have experience moving in different places, I do want to go back to Japan. And I think that stems from like wanting to have spent a longer amount of time somewhere. But at the same time, it's one of those things where like, do you regret then? My mom always says like, then do you regret, us having moved, and do you rather, been brought up and raised in Japan? And I think, well, I'm really thankful for the experience that I had abroad. And I think I am who I am today because of those experiences. But at the same time, I think I would have stayed in one place. Like it would have been nice as well in some ways in terms of building relationships. And I can't say, but that's what I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, moving to different places made me who I am today. So I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to live in a different country. And yeah, I think I wouldn't, I don't regret living abroad, but at the same time, coming back to Japan was such a big struggle for me that sometimes I still regret not being able to graduate the school that we went to in Malaysia. And I think that's the reason why that I want to study abroad for my master's degree, because I think, just the education that I received abroad was so meaningful and fulfilling for me. But, there's like this part of me that just longs to get education outside of Japan that kind of, still haunts me. And I mean, you can say it's a good motivation for me, but it's also kind of like this haunting thought that I still have. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing. And also like with you mentioning regret, sorry, that's the thing too. It's like that fine line where we're also grateful for how like, our lifestyles made us who we are. But then a part of it, it's not so much of regret, but you also wonder, as everyone does. And also like very much like with you, Ayumi, for me too, like, I was very fortunate that my parents could, afford to support my brother and I to come study abroad for higher education. And then in my brother's case, he also completed high school like abroad here in New Zealand. But I know when I was in Thailand, like what perhaps like made my experience worse is I was not even focusing on the present. One part of me was just longing for the past, my time back when living abroad, or thinking my life would only be better when I go abroad again. And not to say this would be the same case for you, but for me, it took actually moving to New Zealand to realize that some things that have changed. It wasn't just the fact that I changed locations. I myself as a person has changed, and things like my mental struggles, it's changes within that no physical move is going to, cure everything. And for me to learn that too, and as much as comfortable as I feel in New Zealand, it's also acknowledging that a part of it's also me. Perhaps like if I go back to Thailand, I could feel a little more belonging if I, made the effort to be more present. But then at the same time, like, because I still feel like an outsider, it might just be wishful thinking too. So it's very much a gray area, but it's nice to be able to discuss this with you both. We can talk about who, what, and or where comes to mind when you think of home. Or this could also be linked to perhaps like where or with whom do you feel like the greatest sense of belonging?
That's a really difficult question.
You want me to go first or?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess, well, for me, like before, I used to feel that my greatest sense of belonging at the schools we attended. And perhaps that's partly why I kind of want to maybe go into primary education. It's because I've never felt belonging anywhere else more than at the schools if we want to go with the place. But now that I've matured and grown, I've come to realize that it's not the school so much the structure, but what is it from those schools that made me feel that sense of belonging. And when I first found out about the term third culture kids, and I realized, oh yes, many of my closest friends also grew up as third culture kids. But now even going beyond that, I realize it's not even so much people who share similar backgrounds, but just anyone who's willing, to hear each other's stories. When I'm with people who accept me for who I am, when I don't have to worry, oh, am I not Thai enough or this or that enough, when it's like, I can just be myself, then I feel like I belong. So it's people. And yeah.
I'd say something, super similar. I think it, as you said, it is the people and the friendships and that space in which you feel like it's like comforting. It's like this comforting space. And to that, I'd also say the place as well, I think. So whenever we lived abroad, we'd tend to go back to Japan, see my grandparents. So it's that particular home, that particular environment, and that also really kind of evokes a really homey, comfortable, like warm sense kind of. In Japan, we have a kotatsu, which is like this little, it's like a warm blanket that you kind of put, it's like connected to the table, and just like the sense of warmth, I think, I'd associate with that place and just friends and nice people.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know, I think I'm really selfish, but when I think of home from like outside of Japan, I think of Japan as my home. So yeah, like you said, sorry, I associate like that warm, cozy feeling of, like a Japanese home, and like being with my family in Japan makes me feel like home. But when I'm in Japan and I'm with people that don't necessarily identify with, like the culture that I grew up in, sometimes I feel like home is outside of Japan. And so I think, I think I'm just selfish.
We all are selfish.
Yeah. Never satisfied with what we have.
And that's relatable too. I think, of course, I had like the nice polished answer that's good for a podcast, but actually in truth, I feel similarly too. Because you switch your answers. It's always like the grass is greener elsewhere, or it's like your other's home. Like when you're in one place, it's like, I feel more at home somewhere else, and you go there and you're like, actually, no, the other.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about the term like third culture kid, or like just third culture? Like, do you remember around when you were first introduced and how?
I think it was by you, Patty, that I first came across the word third culture kid. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure if I'm like, accurately grasping the idea, but yeah, I think it was a cool concept that really explained my experience.
Yeah, I think in secondary school was kind of through, with the IB, they kind of phrase it as global citizen, or that's like a bit new or different from TCK. I think it was in university when I was researching like international schools and things, and that's where I came across the term, and then I was reminded of it through you as well, Patty. So yeah.
In my case, it's probably one of my Google rabbit holes, and I found it. And I think it was during that time as I was feeling quite down. I was in Thailand, and all I wanted, was to go back overseas. And I think if I had known of the term like earlier on, not to say like one term or like to use it as a label, as a savior or whatnot, but if I had known of this as a keyword to look up, I could have realized that I wasn't the only one struggling with repatriating. But I didn't find out about the word until like much later on. And then it's like me reading through like the research and a little bit of the books that have been published on TCKs and realizing, we're not alone, or the fact that, I can just reach out to my friends and discuss this, or say even like with me, with you, Ayumi, like I just turned inward and I kind of cut connections with everyone because I thought, oh no, what's wrong with me? And that's like the whole mental health part too, but to think, oh, like I just reached out, like what difference that could have made. And of course, it's back to the no regrets thing too. But yeah, and what's perhaps a little refreshing for me to see, like I was doing a little digging and I see that like the school we attended in Malaysia, they now have like blog posts where they mention the term. So let's hope that perhaps like in the actual school environment, they would say that. And, perhaps even more important to students, like to parents, that, oh, this is a word and you can search this word. Or for those of us who, like with regards to things like counselings, I might benefit from, doing counseling with someone who's familiar with the TCK experience. So a part of this podcasting is hoping to raise some more awareness.
Yeah.
And then, like, I saw on Wikipedia, like, I'm probably going to mispronounce it, because it, like, in Wikipedia, there's only, like, the English term, like, third culture kid, and it seems like there's only one other country where there's a term, not for third culture kid, but it's a Japanese word for, like, returning children.
Yeah, 帰国子女, is that the word?
Yes. Like, was that word used to identify you?
Yes, a lot, because I think when you enter primary school or secondary school, they label you as 기복시조, and they would like give you special classes, or yeah, they'll help you out with things. So yeah, 기복시조 was kind of my identity for a while, but I think just my image towards the word 기복시조, I think it's more focused on reintegrating to your home country, so it doesn't really take into account your, the culture that you have nurtured in other countries. So, and also the word shijo, so it means child and woman. So it kind of like, gives the image of like a troublesome person in a society. So that's why I don't really like this word that much. So yeah, I think TCK fits me better than kikoku shijo.
And like, because I only read from like the Wikipedia article, I don't know from like Japanese knowledge, and also it did mention there that it has more of a negative connotation too, and like the fact with it being like returning, like you said, it's not about embracing your upbringing, more of kind of like how to reintegrate you. I was almost going to ask you whether you've been identified with that term, sorry, but you've not repatriated.
Yes, I haven't, but I know a lot of, so in secondary school we had quite a few Japanese children, and most of them went back to Japan for university. So they were definitely termed as kikokushijo, and they've talked about how difficult it has been for them as well to start university back in Japan and things in different ways. But I think, yes, I also know that it has like more of a negative connotation. And it's more, as you said, Ayumi, about kind of like fitting them back into Japanese society, whereas TCK emphasizes more how you're kind of in between these cultures. And so, yeah, there is a different ring to both the terms.
So we'll go on to the topic of language. So what languages can you use, and like what languages perhaps like did you learn at school, whether it's like the language, the medium language, as well as perhaps foreign languages that you learned?
I grew up, my family Japanese. I think that was the first language that I spoke. But I grew up in Spain, so I learned Spanish there. And then the schools were always English speaking, so through school English. So then after I moved away to Malaysia, then my Spanish dwindled. And then English is like super powerful. English is getting better. And then in France, English. Then I picked up French and Japanese. So those are the three roughly kind of languages that I speak. English being the one I'm most confident with, though.
Yeah, for me, I think Japanese is my first language. So my family speaks Japanese. And then at school, when I was in an international school, I spoke English. So while I was abroad, I think English was the stronger language for me. But now coming back to Japan, I think I'm more fluent in Japanese. Yeah.
In my case, all of my formal schooling was in English, so I'm more confident in English than Thai. At home, we only speak Thai. My brother and I would feel awkward if my parents, started speaking to us in English. Although I know some families, they do a mix of both their own languages and English. And then foreign languages, I know at the school we attended in Malaysia at that time, Spanish was the only option. So we just took it. And obviously, I hardly remember anything except for maybe the songs.
Oh my goodness, yes, same! The song is so good! Yes!
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so I got to learn Spanish in a formal setting, but instead of having like extra Thai tuition, my brother and I we were taking extracurriculars like piano, and etc. And we only took Thai during the summers. So obviously, like once the term starts again, you forget everything. And I would just be starting at level 1 with Thai. This is with regards to reading and writing. And so while I can speak, I guess, fluently, and what I didn't realize, it wasn't until later on that some people were telling me I speak Thai with a foreign accent. But I mean, I'm not 100% sure because the people who've told me also knew of my life story prior. So maybe, like, were they saying it to tease me, or does my accent sound that foreign? Like, if they didn't know my background. But that's in that case, and perhaps like on this topic, could say some frustrations. Definitely, like, I had fun learning songs in Spanish and whatnot. But I'm thinking, like, if I had the opportunity to learn Thai, like, of course I wouldn't be able to learn Thai in those schools, but now with things such as online learning, obviously I wasn't a fan of a fully online education, but say if we going back, if we attended those schools but maybe had the period of foreign language, having the option to take your own mother tongue, And then for those of us that we could maybe be better at reading and writing, because, it's much easier to learn when you're young than to try to learn now. And then it's like, oh, okay, now I know Spanish songs, but like, how does that benefit?
Definitely. Yeah. That's really good. That's something in our secondary school I went to. They prioritized it. So we had English, then we had French because we lived there. And then we were encouraged to take our mother tongue, and people went as far. They even encouraged people to hire, to make a mini group and find tutors, and you could do it in a small group. So we also had Japanese in our secondary school. So they really valued that, because it is true. Spanish is great, but your mother tongue and kind of your family language is also really important. So yeah.
Well, it's good to know that some international schools are encouraging it. And who knows, maybe our schools have, changed by now. But, at the time we attended, of course. Mm-hmm. How about with your families? Do you speak just one language or perhaps like a mix?
In my family, we speak Japanese. But when I lived in Malaysia, I used to speak English with my sister. But now it's all Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mostly speak English with my sister, I think, and with my parents in Japanese.
How about now? Do you also with your sister? Is it still just continuously English, mostly when you speak with her?
Yeah, that's a good point, because when you mentioned how it kind of the dominance changed, I'd say because my sister's been living in Japan for a long time, she said she's like, I'm losing my English, and so she feels a bit awkward, is what she tells me, speaking in English. So we'll speak in Japanese. I guess that's a good point more. But it's always useful to have another language, because you can,
Yeah, and sometimes there's phrases, in different languages where... Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because in my case with my brother, now, the funny thing with us is that we speak in Thai, but he's actually better at reading and writing in Thai than me. I think he learned it partly through gaming, he would game with Thai people, and I was just there watching Hollywood films, so okay. And now he has that more of his strength, but because I can only really text in English, and I sometimes, text to my family in Thai, but I use Google Translate, but I don't translate phrases. You need to translate words because, otherwise Google will not do you justice. But so when with my brother, so we'll message to each other in English, but speak in Thai. And because it's been since we repatriated, that's been the case. It wasn't until I watched a few home videos that I realized, oh, back when we lived abroad, I spoke to him in English too. Not all the time, but some of it where now it seems so strange. We just type in English, but then speak in Thai. So,
Well, that's cool. Well, you just reminded me that we kind of code switch when we're speaking. So sometimes in the same sentence, there might be a few English phrases, or now because my family's in Thailand, there's a few Thai words that come out. So yeah, maybe it's a mix of all kinds of languages.
Yeah, it's all of our stories. It's so interesting to hear, and to think that we've been friends for so long, but we these are things we never really discuss. Mostly, it's just how are you, what you've been up to, and our conversations have been getting deeper, but in different directions.
Yeah, it's nice to dig deep into TCK experiences. Yeah.
Now, the three of us go on to discuss more about our experiences as TCKs. If you're interested, you'll be able to listen to the rest of this conversation I had with Sari and Ayumi in the 5th episode. As for the next 3 episodes, they'll each feature one-on-one interviews with other TCK guests, so please stay tuned. Take care, and thank you for listening to Our Way Home, a TCK podcast.